Hello and welcome back to Chapter 3, Part D, the final part of Chapter 3, aka the longest chapter in the entire world. We'll be talking about patterns 8 through 10 here to wrap things up with Chapter 3. After this, you will know all the different sentence patterns that there are to know, which is pretty exciting. Let's dive right in with Pattern 8. Pattern 8 is noun phrase 1, transitive verb, noun phrase 2, noun phrase 3. Three different NPs. This can only mean that we are dealing with an indirect object as well as a direct object. All three of the noun phrases in this pattern have different reference. It makes it really easy to tell the difference between pattern 7 and pattern 8 because pattern 7 just has one noun phrase as part of its predicate. Pattern 8 has two, and they are distinct. What's the indirect object, you might be asking? Of course, it's the thing that receives the direct object, such as it were. So the pattern 7 sentence, I threw the ball, becomes I threw Butch the ball. The ball is still the direct object, yeah? The ball is still the thing being thrown or receiving the action of the verb. But Butch is the indirect object, the thing receiving the direct object. Another way to recognize that sentence, I threw Butch the ball, is pattern 8, is simply to say, hey, all three of those noun phrases, I, Butch, and the ball, are referring to different things. This is going to be important when we talk about patterns 9 and 10 in just a moment. The indirect object usually comes in between the verb phrase and the predicating verb rather, and the direct object. So it's usually NP2. But it can also follow the direct object when preceded by a preposition. So for example, if I rework the sentence to say, I threw the ball to Butch, the indirect object is now a prepositional phrase instead of a noun phrase, but it's still a noun phrase in disguise. It's still for sure the indirect object. Actually, this is a great way to check to see if something is in fact pattern 8. Just move the indirect object around in precisely this way. So if you can take the sentence, Janelle lent Julie her notes, and turn it into Janelle lent her notes to Julie, it's for sure a pattern 8 sentence. There is one eensy-weensy little exception here, and it's similar to the exception in pattern 7. So if the indirect object is a reflexive or reciprocal pronoun, again, it's not actually a different NP than NP1, but we're still just going to call it NP2 because we want to make sure we're very clear that it's the indirect object. So even though it's technically not NP1, we're going to call it that anyway. Pattern 8, of course, can have no prepositional phrase. It can just be three noun phrases, and in that case, it would look like this. Noun phrase 1 is our subject, transitive verb as our predicating verb. There's noun phrase 3 in the direct object slot, and the indirect object lives underneath the transitive verb on one of those little L-shaped thingies. Why do we do it this way? Why do we stick it under the transitive verb on one of those little L-shaped thingies? I think it's because when we have pattern 8 with a prepositional phrase, I threw the ball to Butch, then we put the preposition to on the diagonal line of the little L-shaped thingy, and the indirect object still goes on the line. You'll notice that I changed the diagram slightly. In the first diagram, it was NP1 transitive verb, NP3 in the DO slot, and in the second diagram, it's NP2 in the DO slot. That's because we're just putting these NPs in the order they appear. So if the sentence is, I threw the ball to Butch, the ball is the second noun phrase we encounter. With these numbers, we're really just trying to make it clear what has a different referent. There are a few sentences for practice with pattern 8. Here's a pattern 8 sentence. The students bring Dr. Kenley apples. Ah, how sweet. In form, the students NP1, bring is our transitive verb, Dr. Kenley is NP2, and apples are NP3. In function, the students are the subject, the predicating verb is bring, Dr. Kenley is the indirect object, the one receiving the apples, and apples are the direct object, the thing the students bring. There are a few more sentences for you to practice with in terms of form, function, and diagramming. Okay, let's move on to the last subset of patterns, patterns 9 and 10, starting with pattern 9. Pattern 9 is noun phrase 1, transitive verb. Noun phrase 2, adjective. Remember that patterns 2 and 4 have an adjective that complements the subject, and we call it the subject complement. Well, pattern 9 has an adjective that complements something too, but the adjective here is complementing the direct object. And since it's complementing the object, it's very creatively named the object complement. The object complement frequently completes the meaning of the verb also. If you take the object complement away, sometimes you get a grammatical pattern 7 sentence that means something different. Sometimes you just get a sentence fragment. So I'll give you some examples of this in a moment. Here are some pattern 9 sentences. The students consider the course challenging. The teacher made the test easy. The boys painted their hockey sticks blue. So frequently, if we take away the adjective, we just get different sentences. The students consider the course. The teacher made the test. The boys painted their hockey sticks. Often it means something else. We are talking about a complement slot, and we're talking about a complement slot with an adjective in it. So conceivably, if someone were writing a very difficult test question, for example, we could have an idiomatic prepositional phrase in the object complement slot, as in the phrase, the judges deemed the pie out of this world. Of course, they're not literally saying that the pie is outside of the world. They think it's exceptional. There aren't a ton of verbs in pattern 9. Frequent offenders are consider, make, paint, prefer, like, and find. And consider and make are going to be huge verbs when we get to pattern 10 also. Here's what the diagram looks like for pattern 9 when we're just using an adjective. NP1 is the subject, transitive verb, NP2 in the direct object slot, and the adjective in the object complement slot, you'll notice with its diagonal line slanting towards the thing it's complementing, in this case, the direct object, NP2. Of course, brace yourselves, we could make it look a little more complicated if instead of having just an adjective, we had an adjectival idiomatic prepositional phrase, which we'd stick up on a pedestal in the object complement slot. It would look like this. Don't freak out. I've written a few sentences for pattern 9 practice as well. Here's a pattern 9 sentence. The students find grammar interesting. Well, noun phrase 1, students. Transitive verb find. Grammar, that's the direct object. And what do the students find the direct object? Why, they find it interesting. That's the adjective. In function, subject, predicating verb, direct object. NP2 grammar is the direct object. And the object complement is interesting. A few sentences for practice here. Diagram, form, and function, including the delightful sentence, the Stanford team foolishly believed themselves invincible before the game. Have fun with that one. Let's talk now about our very last sentence pattern, pattern 10. This is it. After this, we're done. We know all the patterns there are. This one shouldn't come as much of a surprise to you if you remember patterns 3 and 5. Just like with patterns 3 and 5, pattern 10 has an NP as a complement, but this time it's not complementing the subject, of course, it's complementing the direct object. And since it's doing that, since it's complementing the direct object, it has the same referent. That's why NP2 is the direct object and NP2 is the object complement. They're talking about the same thing. One cool way to check if you're dealing with patterns 9 and 10, because they have object complements, is to swap out their verbs with be also. So the predicate of the pattern 10 sentence, here's the sentence, the students consider the course a challenge, could be written, just the predicate, as a pattern 3 sentence with a be verb, the course is a challenge. So clearly the noun phrase a challenge is complementing the noun phrase the course, whether it's the direct object as it is in the pattern 10 sentence or the subject as it is in the pattern 3 sentence. There really aren't that many verbs that work for pattern 10. Make, consider, find, believe, these are going to be our heavy hitters. And the diagram for pattern 10 looks about as you might expect it to. NP1 in the subject slot, transitive verb, NP2 in the direct object slot, and NP2 with the same old referent in the object complement slot, slanting towards the thing it's complementing, which is, of course, the direct object. And we have a few sentences for practice. The students consider grammar a challenge. Okay. Form, noun phrase 1 is students, considers our transitive verb. Grammar is noun phrase 2, and a challenge is also noun phrase 2, because grammar and a challenge are referring to the same concept. In function, students subject, consider predicating verb, grammar, direct object, a challenge, object complement. And a few more sentences for practice as well, including the students found Dr. Kenley's bulldog photos a genuine delight. Speaking of practice, practice is something we have to keep up with these patterns. It is crucial for your success that you continue to practice these 10-sentence patterns regularly. Butch says he knows this chapter probably blew your minds, and that's okay. With practice comes familiarity. So keep it up, and soon you will be a diagramming champion. Talk to you soon.